Buda, tuko na mgala wako hapa.
Who the hell are you?
Tunataka kupiga exchange. Kwa hiyo prisoner mko naye hapo na wewe mgala.
Prisoner mgani unaongea kuhusu nini?
Lola.
Uko sawa?
Niko sawa. Ni uchungu sijui imetoka wapi.
You lift me up high, you spread my wings and fly me to the sky.
Baada ya kukamilisha mwezi mtukufu wa Ramadhani, basi faalaika, ni juu yako ndugu yangu kufunga siku 6 katika Shawwal. Sawa sawa, umefunga siku 6 katika 10 la kwanza katika Shawwal, au 10 la pili katika Shawwal ukafunga siku 6, au ukafunga siku 6 katika 10 la mwisho katika Shawwal.
Inshallah, ningependa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala atuwezeshe kutekeleza ibada hii, funga ya 6 Shawwal, ili tuweze kupata ujira ambao unatokana na kufuatiliza 6 Shawwal na funga ya mwezi mtukufu wa Ramadhani.
Wiki hii kwenye Mkulima tutaangazia kilimo cha uyoga.
Mushroom kwanza ni ready food, very good for old people like me. It is very rich in protein and it is cholesterol free.
Kisha tuelekee jikoni tuandae kitoweo cha uyoga. Ungana nasi Jumamosi saa 10:30 hapa KBC Channel 1 kwa mseto kamili wa kilimo.
Our arts and entertainment industry has evolved over the years.
It is at such times that our destinies are written. Will we rise up in courage or die in cowardice?
Who are the movers and shakers in film and theatre? Get trendy as we review locally produced films and stage drama every Wednesday at 9 p.m. on Cinemas and Theatre.
Brought to you by the Kenya Film Commission. Film Kenya. Capture Africa.
Cybercrime is becoming a major crisis in the world. According to experts, about $1 trillion is lost to cyber criminals. This is what we call jaw-dropping numbers. In Kenya, it is estimated that every year companies are losing about 5 billion shillings to cyber criminals, and this number is said to be under-quoted. So what exactly is happening to the world? Good evening and thank you very much indeed for joining us. It is on Tuesday, and again you know for sure that it is time for Scorecard, the most intelligent show on this side of Sahara. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Tonight we want to focus on the damages that is being done by cyber criminals and how do we mitigate. Well, welcome to the show wherever you're watching us. The team of experts is in the house, and my colleague Marie Yambo is also in the studio with us. She's going to share with us some numbers that are also jaw-dropping, if you like it. And now, Marie Yambo, I know you're on the other side of the studio. What numbers do you have for us and what story are they telling us?
Indeed, thank you very much, O'Brien. A very pertinent issue. All of us are susceptible to cybercrime. Indeed, if you own a smartphone or even a computer, so you know that you're not safe. And so we hope that you tune in and learn 1 or 2 issues that you can actually do to protect yourself. A very good evening to you once again. Thank you for joining us. This is Scorecard. My name is Marie Yambo. Now, the Constitution of Kenya guarantees the right to privacy as a fundamental right. And to give effect to this constitutional right, the Data Protection Act 2019 was enacted. The Data Protection Act requires data controllers and processors to process data lawfully, minimize collection of data, and maintain security safeguards to protect personal data, among others. And in the case of data breach, the Act also provides for penalties. For example, the Commissioner may serve a penalty notice requiring the person to pay a penalty of an amount specified in the notice, and the maximum penalty that may be imposed in penalty notice is up to 5 million shillings. And failure to comply with an enforcement notice also attracts 5 million shillings. Now, a data subject is entitled to compensation for the damage from data controller or data processor for any violation of their rights. Now, to mitigate cyber threats and foster a safer Kenya cyberspace, the government established the National Kenya Computer Incident Response Team, that is Coordination Center, under the Communications Authority of Kenya. It works to prevent and respond to various cyber threats targeted at the country. Now, let's now delve into some of the numbers that the Communication Authority was able to flag, that is in 2022. So, between October and December 2022, the Communication get an email that is telling you that you've won a certain prize, and definitely you did not participate in that kind of activity. So that is also a phishing activity by cyber criminals. Criminals will pose as representatives from a company or service and call you asking for sensitive material like information about your account or your password, ATM card number, and so forth. Another crime that is common is identity theft, and this is where it occurs when a cyber criminal uses another person's personal data like credit card numbers or personal pictures without their permission to commit a fraud or crime. Another common one is ransomware attack, and this is a type of a malware that has the capability to prevent users from accessing their personal data on a system. Now, what are some of the tips that you can use to protect yourself from cyber criminals? So one of them is a two-factor authentication password. So with this, if you're able to set up, it will always send a notification to your phone, and that will notify you if somebody is logging into your system. Another is change your passwords frequently. And if you're like me, I like having one password for a very long time, so you could be susceptible to cyber criminals. Don't use the remember password feature. This is very common whenever you log in and it asks you whether you want the computer to remember your password. Another tip is avoid using simple passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or as you can see it on the screen, because this will actually give the criminals an upper hand. And remember, a legitimate company will never ask you for your password for an account or account information via email. So those are some of the information that we've gathered for you. Definitely it's going to be a very, very interesting discussion just to learn how to protect ourselves, because we're living in an era of the internet. So you're not protected or you're not safe without learning how to protect yourself. And our question of the day: have you or anyone you know been a victim of cybercrime? We'd like to hear from you on our socials at KBC Channel 1 on Twitter, KBC Channel 1 TV on Facebook. So get talking to us and we'll be able to sample some of your views within this bulletin. So get talking, get tweeting. O'Brien, it's over to you.
Very well. Thank you very much indeed, Marie, for sharing such detailed information about the status of cyber crime here in Kenya. And of course, right now, we just want to go and dig deep into this interesting and intriguing conversation. Well, something else that Marie Yambo, I think I would want to add is don't be tempted to make your date of birth your password. I mean, it's an easy giveaway, right? Because if your phone is stolen or your computer or, you know, your bank account, if it is breached, and I have access to your ID card, then it's a complete giveaway. So avoid all that. Make it complicated, that it becomes very, very hard for anybody to breach your security or your password. I told you tonight we just want to go deep into the world of cybercrime and trying to understand the mind of a cyber criminal. And also we probe what kind of regulations and legislations do we have in this country to deal with cybercrime. We're also going to make recommendations on what needs to be done. And of course, we're also going to look into the organizations or institutions whose mandate is to ensure that we are safe in the cyberspace. Joining us today on the set is Dr. Robert Muthuri. He has such a long CV. He calls himself a legal informatics. I actually did not know that there is such a title. He's going to explain to us who is that. Yeah, I mean, he's here with us, and he's also going to tell us something more about him and how did he end up being called a legal informatic. Thank you very much indeed, Robert, for joining us.
Thank you.
Very good. And next to Robert is a regular face on this show. We have Dr. Well, not Doctor, but Whitney Misheni. I'm praying well for you, sister. She's a political economist. She's always here with us, and of course helping us with her great insights. Thank you very much indeed, Whitney.
Thank you, Brian, and good evening to your viewers.
Very well. And next to Whitney, we have Dr. Fred Ogola. He's an economist as well as a governance expert. Also a regular face on this show. You were not here on Tuesday.
I was in DRC.
Would you be kind enough to... Oh, you were in DRC.
I was in Kinshasa.
Mining gold?
Well, we're also trying to find how the cyber security in DRC can be dealt with. And I'm also glad to have just landed from Mombasa.
Very well.
Right on time for this show.
Wonderful. Yes. Karibu sana to the show.
Awesome.
Let's first of all get things into a right mood. And I want first of all Dr. Robert to help us understand, when we talk about cybercrime, what exactly are we talking about?
So cybercrime is, I would divorce the word cyber first to just explain normal crime, and then think about cyber as crime going on in the online or in the cyber world. So, you know, various aspects of our society have moved online. We have our political world now online. We do our social media, let's say politicking, campaigns, and etc. online. But we also have relationships, culture, communication also happening, a big part of it online. And finally, we also have what we're calling the digital economy. We have all these digital economy blueprints. The government has one, Ministry of ICT has a strategy for all of that. So a lot of our lives today happen online. And so when we talk about cybercrime, it's the crime that takes advantage of, you know, the vulnerabilities that we have online. And I think they form themselves into economic, social, cultural, and political types of crimes. There's a whole wide spectrum, all the way from, you know, cyberbullying to fraud as you know it, but now cyber fraud, all the way to, you know, hacking. Right now we've had the issue of Mandamano. One of the issues is opening the servers. Why do we want the servers open? Do you want to think about that as a cyber threat? Do you also want to think about what is going on in Shakahola as a cyber threat, in that it's a massacre? It's been defined as a massacre now. We've had over 70 people dying that were influenced. And I remember hearing this morning Honorable Beatrice Alachi saying, we no longer can monitor the number of churches we have. How are we going to do that? Is there, you know, you have live stations going 24/7. Do we know what people, are we able to protect everybody? Maybe some of us can protect ourselves. I've heard of two-factor authentication, but does my mother in Meru know about two-factor authentication? How do we protect them, the vulnerable people? And so there's so many vulnerabilities online, and we do need to understand and know how to mitigate them.
Have you ever been a victim of cybercrime?
Not really, but I have faced a challenge where I did send money to the wrong person. And that's a time when I realized even a person like myself, as you said, with all this awareness, didn't know what to do. I had to call my bank. My bank said, you have 2 scenarios. And I tried to call the person I sent the money to, and they said, hey...
Would that be classified as a cybercrime?
Well, it wasn't a cybercrime, but
that's just a normal fraud.
I was vulnerable because I was meant to send money to Dr. Fred, but then maybe it went to Ms. Mesheni. So I called Fred, I'm like, I sent you 20,000 shillings, would you give it back to me? And he says, well, it's not my problem, get the people that sort this thing to sort. And that's actually what they told me. And I actually thought I'd already lost my money. And then I called my bank and they said, look, there's 2 scenarios here. We can make a request for that money, but you could allow us to claim what is available, but if you insist on claiming back the 20,000, if it's not in that account, then it becomes a police case.
Yeah.
So at that point, is Fred a criminal? And am I a victim? I found it very confusing and I didn't understand, and I thought...
But that would not be classified as a crime falling under the purview of cybercrime, right? That is just the normal fraud that we deal with on a daily basis, right?
Well, but it happened through a technological platform.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
You're bringing in the technology issue. I want to hear from Whitney. Have you ever been a victim of a cybercrime?
Unfortunately, yes, I have.
Yeah.
In the aspect of social engineering, where the perpetrators of the crime call you through, probably they call you, or they even they send you a message. Even these messages that you receive from prisons, actually that's a form of cybercrime because it's happening on technology. So one day I received a call and someone was asking me about my PIN for my M-Pesa, and they were claiming that they're Safaricom. So innocently, I actually thought that they were Safaricom because I didn't know the Safaricom line of head. So the point where you just say, this is my password, probably they were probably verifying SIM cards or something. So before you know it, all the money you had in your M-Pesa has been withdrawn. So that's one part of cyber security, where they use the social engineering part, where they use text or calls. And we've also seen this very perverse in Kenya, where people in prisons, I believe it was community prisons, where they were sending people messages that send me this amount of money to probably do what, or sometimes you even receive texts about your child, probably you don't even have a child, and they're saying, send me, I don't know, like 20,000, I probably don't have school fees or a calculator. So that's actually a form of cybercrime, and I believe very many Kenyans have been victims of cybercrimes.
Very good. What about Prof?
I'm sure this is very common, and many people don't accept, but there are very many common cyber crimes. Even when someone sends you a message telling you that, I don't know, I'm a lady from Ghana, my father died and left real estate of $50 billion, and I've chosen you as the most trustworthy partner to help me recover that money, let's work together. I'm sure you receive such like emails. Yeah. Yeah. So it depends on whether you are a victim or you have been you actually lost money. I didn't lose anything, but it wasted my time trying to understand whether there's a lady in Ghana whose father was a king and left $50 billion. And if you are reading this when you're a poor student, I'm sure your hopes rises. Then after that, they collapse when you discover this was a scam. So I'm sure those things happen. And as I can tell you, Obran, you said something which is very technical there. You said that if you are a Kenyan and you have given your birthday as your password, make it more complicated. You know, there's what they call safety and security. They're always at the opposite of each other. When you become safer, sometimes you're not very secure. Because you can have too much security that you cannot even remember your password and you can't even access it. And sometimes you can make it so simple that you can actually access it that actually becomes so vulnerable. And many Kenyans, I can tell you, all these people who have account with eCitizen, nearly 90% of them use their ID as the username, at the same time the password. This is common, and it's some of us could be sitting here with the same issue. So where should you draw the line? Is there someone who can protect, for example, can the state know that the citizens are actually vulnerable and do some measures on how to protect the firewalls of some of these things like eCitizen, the portals which you carry? For example, your eCitizen has your car, Someone can transfer your car from e-citizen. Have you imagined that? And it's possible?
Yeah.
You may wake up one day, you want to sell your car, then you discover that you have no access and this car was transferred to somebody a long time ago. You are holding a what's called the logbook, which is actually not right. And you can't sell that car. And then the owner can come for it. There are so many things. Someone can transfer your company. So there are so many things that people don't know. Then, as I was telling you, O'Brien, there are so many issues that sometimes not knowing them is also helpful. And I can tell you the issue of cyber security or insecurity is just like paternity. You have children at home, you don't want to know whether they are yours or not. You just pray and hope that they are yours. So many banks are not disclosing enough. You hear, you're the one who said it here, that even the numbers we are talking about of the 5 billion lost in cyber security, it is that actually understated. The same way the paternity test was done, for example, this school called Moi, it was actually Moi High School, where they began doing paternity tests. The first 10 were negative. And then they said, they called all the men, and the men agreed that let us test women. Let us be out of this as men, because it was getting shameful. So no one wants to know when you're in your 50s or your 60s, if I tell you I want to do paternity test to your children, you'll freak. I remember, O'Brien, I had a case whereby there was a need to do paternity test for my son. I didn't sleep for 2 days until I got the results. So it is something that you don't want to know. Sometimes by not knowing your problem, for example, your health issues, when you go to see a doctor, you're being told you need to test this and this, and say, please, this one I can test next year. So because you don't want to know.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't want to go that direction, because you're actually opening a Pandora's box, in our society. We don't want to go that direction. But I want to hear from Dr. Arithe. I mean, you said the government is talking about making 5,000 public services online, or moving them to the online space. And Prof was just talking about, the issues of, your logbook. You just now need to do online transfers and everything will be completed. But are we aware of how exposed are we to cyber criminal in our attempts to move services closer to the people?
Thank you, Brian. I think first let's acknowledge where we've come from, which is important as a country, and I think the government has done a lot of work in trying to put the proper regulatory framework. So like in 1998 we had the KICA, Kenya Information and Communications Act, and then that went through about 20 amendments over its life. It's quite the act. And about 20 years later we had now the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, right? And the year later, in 2019, we had the Data Protection Act. So we have a whole ecosystem of laws. And I should also mention, the National Payment Systems Act. I think there's elections technology regulations. CPK also has regulations and guidelines on security of payment systems. Especially in the area of payment systems, there has been a lot of work to try to make them safe. What we do now see with that investment in a regulatory framework, what we need to follow on now is the implementation. So we had the Data Protection Commissioner appointed. She set up her secretariat and has been very vocal in raising the awareness. So for instance, on how institutions, both public and private, need to protect their data. I don't think we are aware of how exposed we are. And I think we need to do the work there. I would challenge Prof here at the university. We do need independent studies of actually how much money is lost, how many people are hacked, and what the lifeline is of that, the life cycle. So you were hacked. Were you able to get police help? Were you able to get the issues proceeded in court, etc.? So the enforcement, that's a big part of it. But also we have to think about this from an individual level. So, like, I don't have this app called Truecaller. I was able to go online and say, remove my number here. But think about Truecaller. What do you do when you allow an app like Truecaller to upload people's phone numbers and contacts, full contact actually, not just phone number, because a lot goes into a contact log, they upload it to their servers, and now other people that information can be used to identify them. You are essentially becoming a data processor, right? Or probably even a data controller. Now, a data controller is someone who determines the means of processing data, and a processor processes information on behalf of the controller. Now you are directly under the regime of the Commissioner of Data Protection, and you are exposed, for instance, up to the tune of, as you said, 5 million shillings, or even jail time of about 10 years, or both. So we do need to understand, even ourselves, how do we handle data? But also now for corporations are struggling with the same. There's not enough threat modeling that is done, for instance. So threat modeling is when you look at your infrastructure, you look at the data you're collecting, and try to understand what the risks are and how to handle them. So sometimes we import what we see in the US or the UK, just generally the West, but it doesn't work here. So for instance, in Africa, we are now mobile fast kind of economy. So you have mobile payment platforms embedded into websites and etc. The West doesn't have that kind of infrastructure. So you see then that the impact assessment that we have to do here is way more.
Very well.
And when you do that, then you can understand the threats that you are likely to face and how to mitigate them.
I want to hear this from Prof. I mean, we have had instances in the past whereby, for example, this just weekend, Naivas, which is one of the biggest retailers in the region, had a serious data breach within their system. We have also had a situation whereby, big institutions like the Central Bank of Kenya, where their website was hacked. Cases of, even websites like the National Treasury, like the Kenya Police. And so if such big institutions, can have hackers accessing their systems, what about, a simple person like me and you?
By the way, you bring a very important twist to this. There was even a classical example where the Central Bank of Bangladesh, somebody hacked the system, withdrew money, sent to Philippines, and withdrew it in sacks. It's a classical case. Central Bank of Bangladesh. So big institutions are suffering. Like I told you, that many institutions don't want report, like you're asking about that people should do research. Many people don't want to report exactly what they're going through because, you see, there can be a bank run. For example, when Naivas reported about this case of breach of their data, if you have been having a loyalty card shopping in Naivas, you now tend now to go elsewhere, or you feel you've been cheated. You say maybe they have actually I've seen a lot of discussion on the social media. So it becomes a very difficult thing. And Obran, there's something very simple. So for example, if Mariambo someone would create a picture of Mariambo and put in the profile of WhatsApp, and she writes there, because nowadays you can actually rate your name on WhatsApp to appear to you the way I want. Mariambo says, Obran, can you please send me 10,000 shillings? I've just landed in Mombasa and my ATM is not working. You see her picture, even a picture she took with you, like the one now you're using for this show. It will take time before you verify that number. You can actually sometimes, for example, you're running to studio and you see Mariambo is in trouble, you'll send the money. The money has gone to them. Just a simple thing. There's also this thing called voice, where people are recording their voices on some platforms. Can someone take this voice and send this voice to your family and make you? So people are so vulnerable. And what I can tell people is that whenever you move from manual to virtual, you lose control. The more you automate, you lose control. And I give an analogy. If you are running on the ground, like you're just running on the road, you are in control of your speed. When you go into a treadmill, you have to run at the pace of the treadmill. Now, my advice to you is don't automate everything. Have a certain amount of control, which is going to be digital, but have a certain manual. That narrow corridor of manualness gives you control. For example, if someone can withdraw money from, for example, from let's say a pension scheme, totally the customer journey is from the beginning to the end to end, automated. That is exposure. The exposure is higher. But if there's a part where someone will sit and verify and sign, then that part bridges. That's why, for example, in pension scheme with very poor systems, is less difficult for hackers to hack it. But if you go to a bank where it is automated end to end, don't have much money, they are more exposed. What I'm trying to say is that if you have a bit of manual, you are in control of that part, and therefore you can prevent a bit of hacking.
It looks like Whitney disagrees with you.
It's open to knowledge she can do, but before we go there, there's a book called The Narrow Corridor. The Narrow Corridor book says that the more we go into these gadgets like mobile phone, computer and the rest, we become more visible to the state. So the state can monitor you. But at the same time, we become more visible to hackers. So the more you automate and the more you go into virtual platforms, the more you're exposing yourself, and therefore you become prone to attacks. And what I'm trying to say is, I'm not telling you to reduce your virtual presence. What I'm trying to say is that go virtual to the extent you are in control. If you have only a password like 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're going virtual, you're exposing yourself.
I want to hear this, from Whitney, even as you respond to what Doctor is saying, that it's also good sometimes to have some element of manualness, as he called it, in our systems. But I also want to hear from you. Do you believe that the government is in control of the situation as we speak?
Thank you, O'Brien. Okay, so I'll first start with, I would like to revert to Prof's submission. I do believe, actually, Kenya is one of the high-ranking countries in Africa with high internet penetration. We saw that also when we had the COVID-19 pandemic, many businesses went online, and nowadays people are working from home and working remotely, meaning many people are still in the online system. So the cybersecurity threats. Now, coming to your question, which was to do with, is the government in control? I do believe that the Kenyan government has invested a lot in technology from 2006, which is a very tremendous step. However, when it comes to cybersecurity threats, I do not believe both the public sector and the private sector, I do believe that they've slacked in this job. Because as we've seen the data which you've just presented to us, we've seen so very, very many cyber threats in government portals, private portals. So I do believe that there's much more to be done by the government and also by the private sector by foolproofing their systems. So I also believe the military, as you've said, the Central Bank of Kenya, the Treasury, I do believe they're very exposed in this world of cybersecurity. And we've seen Africa, I do believe, is under high threat of cyber threats, because they've seen that Africa has not really invested in the cyber infrastructure to secure our data.
Yes. I just want to pick it up, from where you left. And I was going through a report by the World Economic Forum, whereby they were saying that, when you look at the world, in terms of having the right infrastructure, the right policies and the right human capacity, in dealing and deterring with cases of cybercrime. In Africa, you have Kenya, coming at position number 3, whereby you have, South Africa, then you have Egypt, and then you have Kenya. And so it's right to say that definitely the government has invested so much. We want to take a short break, but after we come back, I would really want to hear from you. Is it possible for government to be ahead of cyber criminals? You're watching The Scorecard. We are live from Broadcasting House. We are talking matters cyber security. We are back after the break.
world every day on selected matches. Make a decision. Mozart Bet.
He didn't say why. They haven't gotten back to us. But he made it clear that she won't be doing the interview. And he also said that they would never do an interview with us.
You said to me the first time you came to my office.
Please allow me to take the reins. I hope no matter what, you'll be on my side. And no matter what, you'll support me. Jenny.
I know I can't help you very much when anything bad happens. With my limited knowledge and experience, all I can do is make some phone calls and search some information.
Sorry, Hansen. I just need some alone time and space to think about things. I'm leaving.
Searching for the love I deserve. Making good vibes, oh yeah. Show, good vibes. Save some for me. She is a good girl, and I never wanna see her cry. Her heart and mind and soul belongs to me. Sins of the Father, I visited from home. In a never-ending circle of people born and soul. You lift me up high, you spread my wings and fly me to the sky.
Baada ya kukamilisha mwezi mtukufu wa Ramadhani, basi faalaika, ni juu yako ndugu yangu kufunga siku 6 katika Shawwal. Sawa umefunga siku 6 katika 10 la kwanza katika Shawwal, au 10 la pili katika Shawwal ukafunga siku 6, au ukafunga siku 6 katika 10 la mwisho katika Shawwal.
Inshallah, ningependa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala atuwezeshe kutekeleza ibada hii, funga ya 6 Shawwal, ili tuweze kupata ujira ambao unatokana na kufuatiliza 6 Shawwal na funga ya mwezi mtukufu wa Ramadhani.
Wiki hii kwenye Mkulima tutaangazia kilimo cha uyoga.
Mushroom kwanza ni ready food, very good for old people like me. It is very rich in protein and it is cholesterol free.
Kisha tuelekee jikoni tuandae kitoweo cha uyoga. Ungana nasi Jumamosi saa 10:30 hapa KBC Channel 1 kwa mseto kamili wa kilimo.
Our arts and entertainment industry has evolved over the years.
It is at such times that our destinies are written. Will we rise up in courage or die in cowardice?
Who are the movers and shakers in film and theatre? Get trendy as we review locally produced films and stage drama every Wednesday at 9 p.m. on Cinemas and Theatre.
Brought to you by the Kenya Film Commission. Film Kenya, Capture Africa.
Very well, you're watching The Scorecard, and of course we're live from Broadcasting House. Our conversation today is on cyber security. Marie Yambo is now on the scoreboard. She's about to feed us with some data. Marie Yambo, if you can hear me, just take it up.
Thank you so much, O'Brien, following the discussions in the studio very well. And back at home, we hope that you're also learning a lot from this particular discussion that we already said that everybody is affected by it. I would like to remind you the question of the day, and that is, have you or anyone you know been affected by cybercrime or have been susceptible to cyber criminals? Would like to hear from you. Our Facebook handle, that is KBC Channel 1 TV, and on our Twitter, that is at KBC Channel 1. Get tweeting, get talking to us so that we'll be able to sample some of your views. And if you have questions for our guests also, that will be proper. We'll be able to put it across to them. So thank you so much for staying with us, O'Brien. I should be handing it back to you so that we can continue with the discussions in the studio.
Very good indeed. And that is the question of the day. Just get on to your Twitter handle, get onto your Facebook page, as well as Instagram. And the question is, have you ever, or have you or anyone you know been a victim of cybercrime? My Twitter handle is at O'Brien Kimani, at KBC Channel 1, and at Fred Ogola. Did I get it right for
Ogola,
you?
F. Ogola.
F. Ogola. What about Whitney?
Micheni_Whitney.
Micheni_Whitney. And what about
at Robert Mudhuri?
Very good. We just want to go back into the conversation, and before we went for the break, I asked you this question. Yeah. Is it possible for the government, and not just the Kenyan government, but the governments world over, to be ahead of cyber criminal? And the reason why I'm asking so, just the other day we had a serious data breach in the American system, in one of their safest institutions in the name of Pentagon.
Yeah.
We also want to remember the cases of Bangladesh, as you talked about, as well as Russian hackers who managed to infiltrate so many government systems in the world. And so, with that background information in mind, is it possible for any government to be ahead of cyber criminals?
Thank you, Brian. I'm not sure whether to say ahead, because there's a saying in cybercrime parlance that it's not about if, it's about when you are going to be hacked. Mm-hmm. And that's a posture you want to take. So I think for me, for sure, you can actively monitor. So active threat monitoring is possible, mm-hmm. and I think we do have the infrastructure for that. So we have what is called the National Computer and Cybercrimes Coordination Committee, that's the NC4. Mm-hmm. It's a national body that was actually created under the Cybercrimes Act. And they have their secretariat, their NC3 as well, so the National Cybercrime Command Center. As you also mentioned, we do have the CERT, which is the Computer Incidents Report team that sits under the Communications Authority of Kenya. These are all institutions that are mandated to strategize and figure out what our cyber threats are. The first one, NC4 and NC3, it's more from a national and, let's say, military type of defense. So, for instance, cyber warfare is the fourth arm of defense, and we definitely need to have a strategy and the necessary hardware and software to protect ourselves against other threats that would come to our national borders on the cyberspace. But also, locally, I think we need to now start implementing, as I was mentioning earlier. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, the Data Protection Commission has an investigative unit, or it should have an investigative unit, and that unit should actively seek out what are the breaches that we are seeing and how can we be able to protect ourselves. So let me give you this scenario. And actually, first I could clarify the issue about NIVAS. So with NIVAS, it's commendable. This is actually why it's discussed so much, because it's the first time an institution came out, a private institution came out and said, hey, there was a threat and we neutralized it and this is how we did it. Mm-hmm. And that is how it should go. If you have been hacked and there is significant harm, and by significant harm the DPA says is when personal data has been exposed, then you should be able to report to the Data Protection Office within 72 hours, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
So why aren't institutions reporting? Very soon we're going to be able to follow audit trails, for instance, of leaked data. And when it comes to be known that this data was leaked from a certain organization and yet they never reported the threat, actually currently there's institutions, both public and private, that have been known to have been hacked in the recent past. And we haven't had the data commissioner comment about it, and we've also not had these institutions release any public statements about it.
Very well. I want to hear this from Whitney. You see, when you look at, you know, and I want to take the case of Kenya, for example, and, you know, there is no doubt that the government has invested serious resources in trying to upscale our cyber preparedness, you know, our response when it comes to dealing with cybercrime. But do you believe that the public is well informed when it comes to deterring cases of cybercrime?
Thank you, O'Brien. I do believe that the public lacks sensitization 100%. We see from the public, meaning the government, no, the public. Meaning like the state firms, and also the private corporations, and we also see SMEs. They do not know the threats that they're getting into once they get into the online spaces. Meaning, when they get onto the online space, they totally lack knowledge or even training about how to navigate that whole space. They're just getting in blindly. They're totally exposed. Because I also don't believe that there's been enough information out there about cybersecurity and the threats that the private sector and also the public sector faces. We have also seen that many, as just to buttress some points that they made, they had talked about you know, the governments, but I also do believe that as MSMEs, because they're the ones who are the most unsafe in this whole space, they're the ones who are being attacked the most right now, because people are going there, they're purchasing goods. E-commerce has taken a whole different face, meaning there's a proliferation in people who are doing e-commerce. So actually the cyber attackers are actually not really now focusing on the government. They're now focusing on MSMEs because they can mine data, and as we know, data is the most valuable asset in any business. So they're coming for the data, because when you go there, you put in your payment details, you're seeing it's a small company, it's a medium company, it's a small company, so you're not thinking that there's any threat, but actually those are the ones that are under target, which are being threatened right now. And we've also seen there's also a failure in that sector, because even probably if the MSMEs want to invest in the cybersecurity professionals, they are at not only in Kenya but also globally. There's a shortage of cybersecurity professionals. So I do believe that this is a very institutional failure by just the government, the private sector. There's a lot of not misinformation, but there's a lack of information and training in that whole space. Yes.
Prof. Whitney is talking about data, and we know now data is the new oil.
The issue here is that data has a lot of interoperability, and data is shared. So if I am exposed and you're my friend, you know that you're exposed. So to the extent that private sector is exposed, public sector is equally exposed. So what if we say who is prone to this? You might see that public sector, they have a little bit of resources to invest in it. So they have more resources to invest in how to do what's called cybersecurity. If I just tell you some numbers, why I'm so much scared, even if you guys are telling me that we cannot really find to do manual, O'Brien, the cybersecurity industry, meaning that the amount of money being spent on cybersecurity currently is around $266.2 billion, and is growing at 13.8%. And they're trying to say that in 2027, when you're having our next election, it will have grown to 450 billion shillings, meaning that it's a market which is thriving. And it's thriving also because guys are highly scared. Now, you're thinking, so if we are losing $1 trillion globally, and a quarter of that money is going to try to prevent, then it means that this continues to grow. Remember, our economy is growing at 5%, while that sector is growing at around 13.8%, meaning that there is some attractiveness in that sector, and it is going to continue thriving, and therefore, the more you spend on cybersecurity today, tomorrow you'll spend more tomorrow.
But the question is, where are you spending the money? Because, you know, you look at the budget and you're investing in firewalls, yes, and traditional types of attacks. But right now, the cybercrime area, the sophistication is beyond comprehension. Right now you have things. Let me explain a bit. There's something called like ransomware as a service, right? Like, you know, before it used to be just your computer is hacked and you can't access it. Right now there's just, you know, and by the way, one of the biggest threats in Africa is pirated software. You know, yes, you're working from home, you have all the tech to protect your laptop, but then you go home and you download some games from your children from I don't know what pirating website, and now there's a backend, and that backend doesn't even act on your computer. They just have it information, store it in servers, and then it's sold. So that and that can take months, right? But then when someone goes and says, "Hey, I need information on this and this bank," that information is on the black market and it's sold as ransomware as a service. So basically,
and the solution is made worse by the fact that you know, I was going through Seriani report where they were saying about almost 70% of softwares in Kenya are from the black market.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, because this industry is looking lucrative, I was trying to compare, if our economy is growing by 5% and the cybercrime industry is growing at 13.8%, means it's becoming more lucrative.
The cyber criminal market is growing faster.
It's growing faster than the economy. It's also growing faster than the global economy.
Where do you get these numbers from?
It's on research.
By who?
Research has been done by even the computer Society of Kenya has done research on that. I've found some information.
And they came up with these numbers.
Yes, they come up with these numbers. As you see, if you want to go and do a course, let's say your son will want to do a course. He sees an industry that's growing at 18.3%, isn't it? 13.8%. There's an industry which is growing at 2%. Where are you going to do your degree? In that industry. And hackers, the service providers to prevent cybersecurity thrive on the fact that they are hackers. So it's like somebody is hacking to create business for the solutions provider. So therefore you are thriving on the fact that they are hackers. When hackers end, you have no job in yours. You call your degree, it's called
legal informatics.
Legal informatics. if there are no hackers, he has no job.
But they're also ethical hackers. So maybe also that sector is also
they're white hackers.
Yeah, they're actually ethical hackers.
I actually know a number of companies here in Kenya who hire hackers. You call them hackers what?
Ethical
They actually organize what they call hackathons.
Hackathons,
whereby they hire hackers to
come and test their systems.
And go through their systems.
Other companies also give bounties. Other companies give bounties and say, hey, here's 20,000 USD. If you find a threat in our system, let us know, and you can take part in the bounty. So those are some of the ways you can stay ahead of the threats.
But we don't do that in Ghana.
And something very important, O'Brien,
I've not seen it.
Something very important, I just look at, to know how exposed you are, you need what's called penetration test. And what is amazing is that between the acceptable rate is between 10 and 40%. Can you imagine that there's 10% chance that someone can penetrate your data and the auditors will say that is acceptable rate. For example, IBC system could have been 10%. The failure rate was said there was around, when we were in Bombers, they said around 15-25%, that's acceptable. Can you imagine the acceptable numbers? If you are exposed 40% is acceptable. And some people could be even exposed more. It shows you that this is something dicey. And in fact, to your point, Doc, they say that this cyber insecurity is so complex that you don't even know where to start. And sometimes you might be starting on gates which have already been passed through. The thief has entered the system. Then for you, you are doing firewalls to prevent, but the thief already is in the system.
But let me hear this from you, Prof,
Yes.
even as you continue with your point. When you look and you're the first human being I know called a legal informatic. Sounds like it's a very interesting title. But how many of our children who are going to school are graduating, with computer engineering courses, computer science courses? Isn't this then an area that we are supposed to encourage a lot of, our students to go into?
But I told you it's lucrative. And it's lucrative because it has got supply and demand. The more hackers get advanced, the more we need to invest money in more advanced technologies to prevent them. And I was telling you, the best cybersecurity expert should be the best hacker. So which is the best place to do your degree if you want to become the best security expert? People say either India or Russia.
So this is a case of employing the best thief.
Yes.
Catch the best.
You remember the Catch Me If You Can by Abigail. He was the best thief, then the best bank robber. So he was told, can you help us how to stop bank robbery? It's just a movie, so that he's a thief. But I'm trying to say, it shows the same way. Set a thief to catch a thief. A thief can catch a fellow thief more easily than someone who is an innocent person.
I want to hear this from Robert. You see, we have been in this race, as a country to try and automate our electoral process, from the voting to the translation process to tallying to the announcement of president or the winners. In a case whereby, cybercrime is becoming more daring, more bold and more apparent, is this a good direction for us to take?
Thank you, Brian. I will agree with Prof there. We may have moved too fast with election technology, and especially given that when you look at the procurement of it, especially how late it's procured, the auditing of it, and all the way to the elections, it definitely is the pain point, even right now in our country, right? And I think for me, there definitely needs to be a bipartisan independent institution that will help to audit and monitor the election technology that we have in this country. It will be the only solution that we can have, because right now, under the IEBC, it doesn't seem that that institution is trusted to oversee that technology as it is. And it might be one of the, and I have seen some of the electoral reforms that are being discussed at the moment. That is one of the hot topics. How do you manage and monitor the elections using technology? So
Very
it's
good.
definitely, yeah.
Because we have to come to the end of this program, and as usual, we do scorecarding of various policies and regulations. And I want to start with Prof. I have 3 questions here which I want you to grade accordingly. When you look at our legal as well as regulations when it comes to dealing with cyber criminals or cybercrime, are you convinced that they are strong enough to deter and deal with cases of cybercrime? That is number 1. Number 2, when you look at institutions whose mandate is to deal with these issues of cybercrime, do you think that they are doing their job optimally? And in 30 seconds, I want your advice on what should be the way forward. So those are the 2 questions that each one of you is going to scorecard and then give your opinion quickly. I'll start with Prof.
First of all, to talk about the strength of the institution to deal with cybersecurity, it is a rule of the thumb. In fact, it's common sense that innovation cannot be behind regulation. So innovation will always be ahead of regulation, and therefore you can even give them, in a scale of 1 to 5, you can give them a 2 max. They will always do catch up. If American Pentagon can be hacked, Everybody will gonna do catch up, even you. In fact, even your child can take your phone and do. In fact, let me tell you something amazing. I went to IBC centers, and the people who are trying to key into the IBC system to start the election are putting password like 1, 2. You can even see their password. If you are clever, you can say this is A, B, C, D. You can see.
On laws and regulations,
Yes.
you're giving it to.
So I'm giving it a 2. On the issue of people doing their job optimally, absolutely not. There you can even give 2 also, because why I'm saying so is the exposure, the amount of money being lost can already show you that they are not doing their work optimally. What is my advice? I can tell you, I run a hospital. You must have a backup. You must have a fallback plan, and you must also have a blended process, like there must be some manual blended with automation.
Very well.
Even in life, you cannot automate everything. You cannot even automate food. There must be like, the food can be delivered to you, but the eating, you have to eat the real food.
So backup and, of course, have a hybrid of the two.
Yes.
What about Whitney?
Thank you. First, Oban, kindly just allow me 1 minute to kindly rebut what the 2 gentlemen said. I do believe that it's high time Kenya goes to digital voting, because if we're talking about a democracy where only 63% is the voter turnout, and we want to increase the youth voter turnout, the only way to incentivize the youth into coming out to vote is by voting digitally. And as I've said, Kenya has made serious strides in the digital economy, meaning we are able to go fully fully digital in our elections, like other advanced nations. Okay, now coming to your questions. First, the deterrence effect. I do believe that the government agency, mainly it takes a reactive approach, not a proactive approach. It mostly focuses on. It doesn't foresee like the threat that is going to happen. It only comes in as to protect what has already, the damage that has been done. So for that, I'd give them a 1. For the 1. For the institutions that are mandated in the cybercrime space, I would give them a 2. I don't believe that Kenya has enough laws and regulations in deterring the cyber crimes. And also for advice, I would like for the people who I'd like all the sectors to just have a dialogue about how they can share information on how they can deter like cyber attacks, because we also see that like information is literally in silos. Not many people know what's going on in this space. So sensitization and also just information sharing by all stakeholders in the sector.
Very good. So you're giving it 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Very good. This is to Robert. How do you scorecard these?
On law, I think it's sufficient. As I said, I gave the history, we've come a long way. And even if it's not sufficient, we can always reform to make it adequate. So I'd give it a 3. You also don't want too much law beyond which what people can understand and interpret. So this
is 3 out of 5, eh?
Yeah. With the institutions, I think the institutions are in place. What we need is some independence for some of these institutions. For instance, the computer incidents report team should not be sitting under the regulator, that is CA. It should be an independent team, and that's what other SATs like in the UK and Australia have done. And that will give them functional independence and efficiency. For instance, think about it. If Safaricom or Airtel see a threat in their system, will they go to CA to say, hey, we've seen, you see, because SAT is sitting under CA, you want them to be sitting, it's easier to report when they're an independent institution.
Right.
And the same thing for our elections. Let's have, as I said, a bipartisan body that can help procure, oversee, and audit that technology. As hard as that might be to implement, I think it's the way to go. So for our institutions, I think they're set up, but they're not implementing well, so I'd give them a 1.
You give them a 1.
Yeah.
What's your advice?
So my advice, so I've already given some of the advice as I was saying. I think we definitely just need independence in these institutions, and also a lot of implementation of the existing laws. So the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner needs to give way more advice. There's people who are asking, okay, now we're coming to employ a data protection officer. Will they sit in legal? Will they sit in C-suite? Will they sit in tech? And what is their job? So there's a lot of law that is there in theory. How do I do a data protection impact assessment? what is a data protection impact assessment. Things like that need to be explained to us, like 6-year-olds, so that we may be able to go on and protect people's data, which is the core of what we're trying to do here.
Very good.
Brian, before you finish, I just want to say we cannot do bipartisan, it must be multi-partisan.
I mean, when I look at your scorecarding, it's proper to say that the three of you are in agreement that our laws and regulations are weak, they need to be strengthened, and that is where your gradings are low. But in terms of institutions, you are also saying that the grading here is fair. You're saying that the institutions are there, but they just need to be empowered. Well, that is what we do here best, looking at problems, assigning solutions, and of course grading the institutions and policies as well as regulations. This has been the scorecard. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Our conversation was around the cyber crime and whether we are doing enough, are we exposed, and what we need to do as a country to ensure that even as we leapfrog in this space, we do so in a safe space. And the verdict is out. There is some retweakings that we need to do, as well as tying some loose ends. Well, I want to take you now back to Mariambo, who is about to say a thing or two before we wrap it up, because I can see time is really well spent. Marie.
Indeed, O'Brien, Kimani, thank you so much for that fruitful discussion together with our guests and the panelists in studio tonight, talking about cybercrime and cybersecurity and what you can do about it in terms of protecting yourself. And we've also got to know how much Kenya is actually losing in terms of cybercrime. Now, I won't be able to sample all of your questions because of time constraints, but thank you so much also back at home for watching and participating. I'll only take one comment from Marcy Gaki. It's not a matter of if, but when you're going to be hacked. So just as we said it from the beginning of the program, that as long as you have a smartphone, for as long as you're using computer or the internet, then you are at risk of cyber criminals. So thank you so much for your time. We hope to see you again on Tuesday. And back to O'Brien, from me, it's goodbye for now.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Marie. And time has always been very unkind to us that you couldn't read or see our comments from the public. Thank you so very much indeed. We'll see you again on Tuesday, same time right here on KBC Channel 1. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Until then, have yourself a great week ahead of you. Bye for now.
What am I forgetting? Nini, workers paid, rent checked, mlango locked, visiting notice, ngoza mzae silitoa jana la internet zote. What is it? What am I forgetting?
Nini, nimesahau kucheza Loto Moto.
Usisahau kucheza Loto Moto. Unaweza shinda hadi milioni 2 kwenye M-Pesa. Chagua lipa na M-Pesa. Paybill number, weka 75